Spring Hill Jack. I saw those two words in the paper this morning, and my God, how they take me back. All of that was 8 years ago, almost to the day. I remember my dad wanted my analysis of the situation. As for my mom, just wanted me to come home. But I didn't want to come home. I was enchanted. Enchanted by the dark and mist-flown Strawberry Spring, and by the shadow of violent death that walked through it on those nights 8 years ago. The shadow of Spring Hill Jack in New England, they called it a Strawberry Spring. No one knew why. It's just a phrase old-timers use. They say it happens once every 8 or 10 years. At New Sharon, the Strawberry Spring began on the 16th of March, 1968. A junior named John Dancy was on his way back to his dormitory, began screaming into the fog, dropping his books on and between the sprawled legs of the dead girl, lying in a shadowy corner of the Animal Science parking lot, her throat cut from ear to ear, but her eyes an almost seemingly sparkle as if she just successfully pulled off the funniest joke of her life. Dancy, an education major and a speech minor, screamed, and screamed. The next day was overcast and sullen, and we went to class with questions eager in our mouths. Who? Why? When did you think they'll get him? And always the thrill question, did you know her? Did you know her?
Yeah, one of my roommate's friends dated her last semester.
I think I had an art class with her. I'm not sure.
Yes, I knew her. She asked me for a light once in the grind. She was at the next table.
We all knew her. Her name was Gail Sermon. She was an art major, she wore glasses, had a good figure, and was well liked, but her roommates had hated her. She never gone out much, even though she was one of the most promiscuous girls on campus. She had been a vivacious girl who talked little and smiled seldom. She had been pregnant, had leukemia, and she was a lesbian who had been murdered by her ex-boyfriend. It was Strawberry Spring, and on the morning of the 17th of March, we all knew Gail Sermon. It was Strawberry Spring. No one walked by themselves through the half-academical, half-fantastical campus that night. The fog had come again. Around 9 o'clock, my roommate burst into our room.
They caught him. I heard it over at the grinder.
They got who?
I don't know, some guy. Her boyfriend did it. His name is Carl Armolara.
Okay, that's good. I settled back, relieved and disappointed. With a name like that had to be true. He left the room to spread the news down the hall. The fog came again that night, not on little Cat's feet, but in an improper silent sprawl. I had a headache and I walked for air. For me, that was one of the most beautiful nights I can remember. The people I passed under the hollowed streetlights were murmuring shadows, and all of them seemed to be lovers, walking with hands and eyes linked. I walked until nearly midnight, thinking to myself, who is to say that one of those shadows was not the man or thing that had came to be known as Spring Hill Jack? That night, there was another murder. I heard rumors that Carl Armolara had not left his cell all night when it happened. The victim's name was Anne Bray, and this time whoever killed her took her head. Until the time of her death, she had been an editor of the school newspaper, a beauty pageant runner-up, and overall a brainy girl. And now she was dead. Worse than dead. I walked into my afternoon class like everyone else, nodding to people I knew and saying hi with a little more force than usual, as if it would make up for the close way I studied their faces, which was the same way they were studying mine. There was someone dark among us, as dark as the path which twisted across the mall or wound among the 100-year-old oaks on the quads in the back of the gymnasium. We looked into each other's face and tried to read the darkness behind one of them. For a long time he was gone. I could only look out the window, and even after I had opened my book, stared in it, part of me was still there, walking in the shadows, where something dark was now in charge. That night, Adele Perkins was killed. He killed her and left her propped behind the wheel of her 1964 Dodge, to be found the next morning, and they found the parking lot in the back of the seat, and part of her in the trunk. Written in blood on the windshield, this time, fact instead of rumor, were 2 words: ha ha. A week later, the president of the college announced that spring break would be moved up by a week. Everyone had to leave campus. At that point, no one wanted to be there anyway. They called it a Strawberry Spring, and no one knew why. But it was an evil time, lying time, that only comes once every 8 or 10 years. Spring Hill Jack slept with the fog. From that day forward, people tried to put him off as a distant memory. That was the year I graduated. The next year, I got married. After that, I got a good job at a local publishing house. I had a child, a young boy, who's soon to be and now almost school age. Life had been good. I should have known it would not been stayed that way, for Strawberry Spring had come again. This morning's paper says a girl was killed on the New Sharon campus. She found in some bushes next to the academic building. She was not all there. My wife is upset. She wants to know where I was last night. I cannot tell her because I can't remember. All I remember is the fog. I've been thinking about that night, the night my head was hurting. I just kept thinking about my trunk and why in the world I should be afraid to open it. My wife has been crying. She thinks I was with another woman last night. Oh dear God, I think so too.